Hey, I just want to say hi to Dan. Hey, Dan, Dan is our producer, Ryan. Dan, for you, we're going to vary the introduction today. I'm not going to say hello, boys and girls. I'm going to say something else. Well, hello, my dears. Welcome to the next episode of the Mindful Investor podcast show. I am Alex Osenenko here with my hero and co-host, Steve Rosenberg. Steve, how's it going, brother?
Going good, man. It's going good. Thanks for having me. As always, I appreciate being here with you.
That smile, that determination. You probably woke up at 4 a.m., overachieved at the gym this morning.
I did. Yeah, it was a good day, man. You got to grind it out, right? Nobody cares. You just got to do it.
And those of you who are watching the video, you will be rewarded with Steve's clean-shaven, beautiful, shiny face. He's extremely shiny today, so hopefully he'll deliver.
I'm glowing. I call it glowing.
Glowing, that's right. The kind of audio experience we're looking forward to. But today we're going to unpack, this is season 2, all about single-family investing. Today we have a great guest. And our topic today is how to have a career and own investment properties long distance. Steve, why don't you introduce Ryan? He's your friend. You guys go way back.
Yeah.
Talk about Ryan, and let's welcome him to the show.
Yeah. So Ryan Harrison, a good friend of mine, also an airline pilot, and I thought he'd be perfect for this because not only have we known each other, he owns properties. He actually owns them in Houston. He's from Colorado originally. Lives in Guam, where I used to live and fly out of. He's flying out of Guam. He actually bought from my bookstore. He actually bought one or two of my rental properties, which we won't go into too much, and experienced the same dramas that I went through. Yeah, so we've got some good stories, good history. Ryan's kind of seen the evolution of real estate, and he's kind of been evolving and growing and doing some buying and selling and some diversification of his portfolio. So it'll be good to talk to him about that. So without further ado, Ryan, thanks for being on the show. I know it's like 3 a.m. for you Guam time, so appreciate you being here, man.
Yeah, 3 a.m. Friday morning, so I'm in the future. So What would you like to know?
Oh yeah, what's WeWork stocks gonna look like? Oh, too soon.
Ouch. Too soon.
I don't know. Stay out of stocks. Just buy single family homes and other real estate.
Well, that's our show, folks. Hey, Ryan, tell us how you got into the real estate. It's crazy. Steve got you into it. Like, what was the first, what was the notion? What stage were you in your career, in your life that you said, oh, I should buy a home, investment home?
Well, it's something I kind of had an interest in. My very, very first home that I bought was obviously my primary home, but when I bought that one, I bought it on a short sale. So that was kind of my first, I started dabbling into that stuff, and I tried to apply some things even down to the purchase of my own home. So that's where I kind of really got the start of it, but didn't have all the education. I read, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I read, a Donald Trump book and stuff like that. So there was kind of that initial seed that was planted. And then obviously, Steve and I and, the rest of the country and the world, we witnessed and saw 9/11 and what that can do to an economy and, a person's personal stocks or whatever. So, and then just from an airline point of view, you have Steve and I every 6 months, we have to go, and do a medical and stuff like that. So if you lose your medical or you lose your livelihood, or some events happen, you kind of want to have that backup plan. So I started along those lines, thinking like that. At one point, also I saw. So my father, he was a master electrician in Colorado, and ended up having to go to other parts of the country because, when construction is good, life is good, and when construction goes down, things get a little bit tight. So I saw also that stress of money. And that's the one thing I never wanted, was the stress of money. I didn't necessarily need or want to have all the money per se, but I just never wanted to have the stress of it, because part of that was I saw he had to take care of my mom. She got really sick and had a fairly pretty rare disease and whatnot. And so I just, like I said, saw that initial stress. So then I really dove into finding other streams of the income within the real estate. And then I happened to meet another pilot. He was at Continental at the time, and he's unfortunately no longer with us. Steve would probably know him also, first name Jim, but he gave me a little email address and website and phone number, and there was this mentor group in Houston. So then that kind of got me on the right path and accelerated me forward in what I needed to do, and put
Ryan,
me on the
what kind of a, sorry to interrupt, what kind of a support group? Are you talking about real estate group? Like what was was that about?
Yeah, it was a real estate group. Steve had gone through the same one. I hadn't met Steve yet. And then, so I did that, got on to learning with all of that. And I focused on, when I initially went through that kind of initial training with that place, I focused on the single family side of stuff, because at that time in Houston, you could pick up properties, I mean, $50,000 to $80,000, and you could do, get the rehab financed into the deal.
Have you had a notion of like C property, B property, A property at that time? I mean, because according to Steve's book in those days, right, a 50K home was more of a C home, where in a rougher neighborhood where it was tough to find reliable renters, and even those, got broken into, and there was just issues abound. But have you thought about the investment strategy at that time?
A little bit. I mean, I was still kind of dabbling into it. To be honest, in Houston at that time, yeah, you could go into those exact properties like what Steve had mentioned. But my very first rental home, I bought it for just over $70,000, and it was literally maybe 10 minutes away from my primary house, and in a very nice, solid, blue collar neighborhood. And I regret selling that house to this day, just for kind of more so for sentimental reasons. I did take a fair amount of equity off the table with that. And I actually sold that to a friend of mine, kind of worked out a deal and packaged a few homes and sold it to him, another friend that was trying to get into the real estate. And so I had sold, I don't know, 3 or 4 of my properties to him.
Why sell? What was the motivation? Like, okay, so you had these properties producing income, presumably, right? Why sell? Were you getting in a different asset class?
Well, from there, I ended up kind of changing my goals and trying to progress forward. So part of that mentor group I went through was, okay, do the single family, get X amount of homes and X amount of income or equity capture, and then roll them, do a 1031 exchange into a multifamily. So what I was doing was I had kind of brought together a group, and there was going to be 4 of us. There was going to be 4 investors, and we were looking at a multifamily property, and I was going to do a 1031 exchange and roll, all that stuff into that multifamily property. That deal fell through. Kind of found where the owner was maybe cooking the books a little bit and kind of exaggerating on a few things. And so we said, hey, we'll still buy the property from you, but you need to come down because your value's not as high as you think it is. So then since that deal fell through, I ended up 1031ing maybe, I think it was 2 out of the 3 or 4 properties. I think, 2 out of the 3. And so I just was kind of trying to do part of that natural progression, and then, try to capture the economies of scale. And then, maybe at that time too, a little bit of it was ego driven. You want to kind of set that next level, set that goal, and kind of, you kind of get a taste of it, and you get on the ride of the real estate, and it's fun, and it also, that particular apartment, it was going to be kind of a motivating thing, turning that thing around and providing a nice product to the people that were going to be staying there. So that becomes part of it too. It's kind of interesting.
Gotcha. So single family for you was a stepping stone, I guess, towards more of a like a multifamily property you can turn around and have it outperform or overperform the current state and make
Well,
some money.
I think what he was saying is so let me just interject here.
Yeah.
The group that he's referencing is the same group that I was a part of, that I had learned about apartments and bought an apartment complex in. And that's kind of the mode or model that they teach and encourage. And so you get kind of caught up in that, thinking I need to own a multifamily. And I don't know what Ryan's experience was, but when you have a multifamily, yes, it's great. You can add a lot of zeros to the front end, but you also have to add a lot of zeros sometimes to the back end when things go wrong. And so sometimes, you're dealing, when you're making an acquisition of a multifamily, it's a sophisticated investor. They don't have to disclose everything, where a single family they do. So it's basically buyer beware, and it's on you to figure out if they're cooking the books, if the numbers are wrong, if it's running on pro rata, those kind of things. And Ryan, I don't know if it sounded like you were going down that path, but then maybe you reversed and started kind of beefing up the single family again, or what happened with that?
Yeah. What I've basically done is, and then you guys can kind of ask the questions around. So basically what I've done is I had those 12 single family homes. I took the equity capture out of 7 of them, and then I put them I got 3 apartment deals now, but I still have maintained 5 single family homes that I manage, and I manage them here all the way from Guam. And then I manage 4 properties here on Guam for a friend of mine, another pilot that's no longer based here, but I manage those for him. And so I kind of, make sure I maintain my real estate professional status, et cetera, for lots of reasons. But so the thing that I do enjoy with the single family is it's nice, it's steady Eddie money. And the one thing I will say as far as managing the properties, it's, having that team in place. Even though it's a single family home, you still want to make sure you got that team. And I've been, lucky. I don't want to say lucky, but I've been blessed because I put the work in and not so much luck per se, but the same tenants on average, they've been with me 5 to 6 years in the same houses. And so I try to take care of them, provide a good, safe product and good customer service. I mean, that's a big thing. Good communication, check up on them and stuff like that. And again, I had consolidated to my 5 newest properties, and they were maybe a little bit more expensive per se in the Houston area. Not super expensive. When I say that, they're not your like those deals, Steve, that we were getting back in 7 and 8, at 50, 60, 70 grand. They're, I purchased them maybe at 150 at the time, 150,000, which at that time was a little bit above what you kind of wanted to shoot for. But man, the equity's been good, and the way I've done them, and so I'm still cash flowing, 300 to 400 on each one a month. So that's still good, and it's a higher rent that I have to shoot for, but it's also been, especially with me being here on Guam, it's been a little bit less hassle as to deal with this turnover and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's funny, when Pete and I had our properties, the low end properties, and Alex, 50 was high for us. Like, we were buying them in the 30s. One I think I bought for like 28. It needed a little tender loving care, but I mean that just to give you an idea of price points that we were at. 50 was an expensive one for us back in the day.
Sorry to interrupt. There's one thing I hate when I listen to I'll listen to Bigger Pockets and other podcasts, and you'll say, well, I bought this home for $30,000. Like, this doesn't exist anymore. Like, we can't continue talking about this. Like, who buys a home for $30,000? Of course I would buy it. But now it's like $220.
Well, the problem
You
is,
know?
is when you get a house for 30,000, 40,000, 50, whatever it is, the price point, you think to yourself, you know what? I'm so positive in this thing. The mortgage is nothing, and I can make so much on the cash flow. And you think there's no downside to that, right? You think, man, I can hold this for 6 months empty, and the mortgage is like $300 a month. I can do this all day long because it's making $400 a month when it's rented.
Mm.
The problem is that you don't take into account the high maintenance costs of the properties, the high turnover of the tenants, very high turnover, because they're that level price point of people that are making that kind of money that are renting those properties are month-to-month type people. So they're very transient. And when they leave, they take a lot of gifts with them. So now you don't have a basic make ready, and I don't know how you could be hard on a house, but I remember going in and seeing broken toilets. Like the toilet bowl was broken in half. And I'm thinking, what could you possibly be doing to a toilet bowl that you'd break a porcelain bowl? But my point is that it wasn't just a couple $100 turn. It was thousands of dollars. So all that cash flow that me and Ryan made was gone back into the make ready to get it re-rented for another 8 or 9 months, where you pay a little bit more, like Ryan said, and I completely agree with him. Yeah, you're paying a little bit more, which, it's all relative. This is Houston price points, and I'm paying, 160 to 200 now for my rental properties. But now you have a tenant that's going to stay long. They take care of the property. They don't complain about stuff. And especially, so in Ryan, what I was going to ask you is that why you think that you've been able to self-manage? Because you're, in Guam, you're number one, for people that don't know, Guam is on the other side of the time zone of the date line. So like right now, it's Friday morning for him. So if somebody calls him in the middle of the night or middle of the day, it may be middle of the night for him. He can't
Friday early morning.
Or yeah, and so all of it, so that you've got a time zone issue. I caught that what you said, by the way. It's you've got a time zone issue, and so if you had all these old smaller price point rentals, you probably couldn't do this. What you're doing is my guess.
Yeah, and I was doing it, but it wasn't always. It wasn't that it was hard, but there would always be like these little things that you'd kind of have to help manage the people through sometimes, like, oh, well, this just happened. And again, those are slightly older homes. So there was, I put in, new AC units and this and that, but, those price points too, sometimes that, the people are working very hard. They're working, maybe 2 jobs, let's say. And so they don't always get around to getting to the hardware store and buying a new filter for the AC unit. So they don't maybe think about that stuff. And I get it, they're renting. So I ran into some of that stuff. So it was just like a little bit more to deal with, but still I was able and going back to having a team, the thing that helped me out and still does to this day is having that team in place. And at least in Houston, and I don't know about your experience, Steve or Alex, but the number one team member for me is my AC guy. I don't even ask him what the prices are. I just have him do it. And matter of fact, I tell my tenants, and matter of fact, I just rented out one of my other properties, brand new tenant. First thing I tell them, when I'm showing them the house and everything like that is, and they signed a 2-year lease. That's the other thing. It's like sometimes nowadays they want to lock in a price and depending on what it is, yeah, okay, I'll give you 2 years. But the number one person to have on the team, in my opinion, is your AC guy. I tell the tenants, don't call me, call the AC guy directly. And because that'll be your number one issue that'll upset your tenants and get them going. And that seems like, at least in Houston, if you've set up the property correctly in the beginning, that on occasion, since it's a mechanical device, it's going to be the one thing that always goes out.
Going nonstop. Yeah.
Yeah.
I got a question, Ryan. You said something earlier, and I know what you meant, but I think we should expand on it. You said that you keep your real estate professional designation because of so many properties. And this is important because you being an airline pilot and tax bracket and all that, it's a huge benefit. So can you kind of explain what that means for people that don't understand a real estate professional and what benefits that actually gives you? Because I think it's important for people to hear that.
Yeah, so you don't want to make obviously investment decisions 100% based on tax incentives, but when they're there and you can do them, you definitely want to be a part of it. But a real estate professional, basically, there's specific IRS rules to it, and kind of just touch base on it. It's like you got to have 750 hours of active real estate time, and so if you have, you know, 5+ properties on average, you can kind of make that work and fit in. And then plus with other stuff I do, you got other types of education, other types of activities, networking, or other events that you go to that all kind of apply to that. And like I said, I'm also managing properties on Guam for other people. And so that keeps me busy as well. So it starts coming to where you can start protecting not only your passive income from the real estate, but then also into some of your earned income, which, these days, well, if it's there, you need to do it because it's part of the tax rules and laws, and that's what the government wants you to do.
It's there for a reason.
Yeah, well, they're tax incentives, right? It's if you follow what the government wants you to do as far as the tax rules and laws, then you're able to make money. And every country has basically the same type of rules that we do, and so they're tax incentives. And you got to look at the government in a way as they're part of your partnership, whether you want them or not. They're there and they're part of your partnership. And so if you kind of follow along and play within the rules that they designate, it's not, real estate people going off and making our own stuff up and doing anything that's crazy or shady.
So you're not gaming the system, but you are understanding the system and using the system and the incentives that the government designed for whatever, enabling housing for people. I'm sure there are programs that are specific to this. Then you can, I guess, write off some of the expenses you do with renovations and stuff off of your income, I suppose. But do you have a tax professional, or do you go research these things yourself, Ryan?
No, I have part of my team. I have a tax professional that handles all that.
Let's name your team. Like, what kind of team? So people are sitting right now thinking, okay, I'm going to get into my first house, or maybe I already have my first house. Maybe I have two. But like what you said, you keep saying team, which is great. That's a recurring theme we get through a bunch of interviews we've done is like, hey, I have to have a team. So who are the team members? Like you already mentioned your AC guy, number one. What else? You got tax advisor.
Tax advisor. I got lawyer for LLC. Keep you, legally, make sure everything is protected. You start thinking about that stuff. You have a family and stuff. Steve, he's seen pictures of my daughter and stuff. So, I helped raise my nephew and stuff. So you start, all of a sudden you have those extra entities within your family. And so you want to make sure you protect that. So get the LLC lawyers involved and make sure everything is on the same page. And what I've done too is I've made sure that my LLC lawyer also talks with my accountant. So they're actually kind of part of the same group. I mean, they're separate companies, but they work and network together. So I've tried to ensure part of that.
Sorry, Ryan, to just to clarify here, is your tax advisor same as your accountant, or are those two different people?
Two different people.
Got it.
Two different people, but kind of they network together. I kind of met them. I went to I've done it twice now, but I've been part of a group where Robert Kiyosaki himself, he shows up, and I started listening to him. And he's obviously one of the first books I read, but then I started really listening to one of his key points, and he said, you got to have that team also. And he spelled it out very directly. And he actually gets into having a bookkeeper as well, because then you're taking the emotion out of your numbers. And so that's my next step. And that is instead of doing some of the book work myself, I'm going to have, starting January 2020, I'm going to have a bookkeeper start taking care of my other stuff, because I've gotten, into more, like I said, the multifamily stuff, and the single family stuff has allowed me to elevate into that. It's also elevated me into some oil exploration and saltwater deposit type stuff. So the single family, became the foundation to what I've tried to bring forward and into my goals and build on it. But the foundation has been the single family homes, and then I've maintained them because, like I said, they're kind of that steady Eddie, very conservative. I don't have to, worry about the stock market with the per se with the single family homes. So that's part of the, going back to your question, that's part of the team and why I'm doing it. And it makes it easier because then it also, it allows you to focus on the next goal or the next single family property or whatever it may be. And then you're able to look at the whole forest instead of just the one tree. And you can say, okay, where can I go with this next and how?
Well,
And then
I think what it does,
you just put it in there next to the other ones and introduce it to your team members, and then it's taken care of.
I think what it does too, from what I've learned, is that it gives you clarity to think about other things, but you still have a career. You're still an airline pilot. You still have your life, your free time. You've got, you're spanning the globe of, real estate, whether in Guam and then in Houston. So, I mean, it's giving you clarity of not doing things that, number one, you may not be good at or don't like. You're putting it in the hands of people that know what they're doing. Because even if you liked doing accounting and bookkeeping, if you were bad at it, it would still be the same result of you getting an audit because you don't know what you're doing, as opposed to just saying, you know what, I'm going to hand it to someone else. Let them do it. Let them advise me on their experience so that I can go do other things. And I think it's smart what you're doing. Let me ask you this. How many hours a week? So you've got 5 properties, let's just say single family, and then you're actively managing another 4 or 5 in Guam. So, 8, 9, 10 properties. How many hours a week do you think that you are spending dealing with these properties, if you had to guess?
I mean, it varies. If I factor in everything, probably looking at, on average, including, and this includes all the drive time and stuff like that. Cause I do, when I go back to Houston, I check on them and stuff, cause I enjoy that stuff too. I guess on average, the certain times of the year would be more busy, but I think on average, maybe, I don't know, 10 to 14 hours, if that, you kind of, you got your busier times when you got a bigger.
You're gonna have, you're gonna be on the, if you ever got a vacancy or an issue going on, I get it. But on average, you're looking at maybe 2 hours a day at the most, if that. But and then some days they're kind of bulked up where you're dealing with something all day. But I think it's something for people to understand that you can own properties and you're owning them spanning the globe, really, like I said. And you're able to do it 2 hours a day and have them taken care of, get a lot of passive income, get the equity in the properties. You're getting you're able to get the tax benefits of, off of your W-2, which a lot of people don't think about, which is very, very valuable. And it's giving you the ability to do other things. I know you've got, you do some charity work. And so it's giving you the ability to do the charity work that you do. And you've got something you do in Houston and then something you do in, is it Cambodia or where is it?
Yeah. So, okay. So it's, enjoying the travel and stuff like that. Cause again, you want to get out and see the world. And that's what the single family stuff is initially, provide that extra income, kind of go travel. So I've been to Cambodia, 5 times. The first tuk-tuk guy that hooked up with, we became really good friends, awesome guy. He's met, my family and everything like that. And I've been to his house, out in the middle of nowhere in this beautiful rice fields and stuff like that. Well, his sister, she was riding a bike back and forth, one direction, 45 minutes to school, riding it back home. And Cambodia is very, very hot. And so, and then she would come home, get cleaned up, eat a little bit, and then she would ride her bike 30 minutes to another village, and she would help and tutor kids in that village. And her English was very, very good. So I ended up buying her a scooter, motorized scooter initially, so she could kind of get back and forth quicker and then have more energy to focus on her studies, and then also have that time to help out the other students. Well, and then she went to an American college there in Cambodia, And I said, she was a little worried about not being able to attend that and this and that. And I basically just told her, don't worry about it. And so between myself, and then she also picked up a scholarship as well. So she's been doing really well. As a matter of fact, I think she graduates here this December, and then the ceremony is going to be this next April. So she's already knocked that out.
Wow.
And also in Houston, with the multifamily partner, Rockstar Capital, Robert Martinez, he puts together a great breast cancer walk there every year in October in Old Town Humble there. Literally shuts down the streets. The police come out, some of the local vendors, like Chick-fil-A, some of the, local, what's that donut place there? Yeah. They come out, stuff like that.
I don't eat it. I just know about it. For the
Yeah. So it's a nice community thing, but he gives back in that sense to the breast cancer because all these books that you can read, whether it's, Robert Kiyosaki's, I've also read the Rich Dad, Poor Dad books. Also Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill, where he's basically doing a long, several year interview with Mr. Carnegie, and then also what's the other book? Anyways, and Donald Trump's, even Donald Trump's books. I know people love them, hate them, or whatever, but always somewhere in those books, they always say once you get to where you're at a successful point and you've taken care of yourself and your family, you need to make sure you give back. So that's also, I've tried to make sure I complete that circle. And, it sounds hokey. You read that stuff in the books or whatever, and it actually feels really good to be able to do that. And it just kind of adds to everything else in the bigger picture of what you're doing.
Can I get back, Ryan? This is fascinating, by the way. Finding what you're passionate about and investing in other people. I really like the fact that you're doing this thing in Cambodia for a particular person, because that must be, because when you give to a group, like you don't always have a direct influence on the impact. Like this must be super rewarding to have actual, serious investment return via this person getting educated, and you're being a large part because of her success in the future. So that must feel incredible. So I commend you for that. But I want to get back and really try to give our listeners couple takeaways. Like we started on this team thing, we went on a tangent. I want to get back to the team thing, if that's okay, because I have written down AC guy, lawyer, tax advisor, accountant, and bookkeeper. Seems to me very like, is bookkeeper and accountant two different people?
Yeah, two different people.
And
well, I mean, they could be in the same, but the bookkeeper is going to keep track of your day-to-day stuff. The accountant's going to be more on your taxes and focusing on the tax laws, whereas the bookkeeper is going to be more general, and again, Robert Kiyosaki, he's hardcore about that stuff. He's like, he won't do a deal with somebody when he asks them, who does your books? And they say, oh, my wife does it or whatever. He's like, nope, I don't want to do it. Because he wants to say, hey, show me your balance sheet. And he doesn't want to hear that your wife or your husband's taking care of the books, because you have that emotion involved. He goes, but a bookkeeper is just going to tell you straight up, this is what it is. This is where this is where things are at. And then also it's going to make it easier when I hand over the information to the tax accountant as well. And then that in turn is going to make your tax returns not only more efficient for my time, but it's going to give them all and any additional information that I maybe forget or overlook or lose sight of. The bookkeeper will have that involved as part of the report. And then so that'll make it that much easier for the accountant to, do a better tax return for you.
Who else is on the team? So I have 5 entities right now. Who else do you have? Do you have anybody else?
Well, I've been very blessed over the years, and out of all seriousness, a lot of it, Steve and I, we tease each other pretty bad, so we have a good time.
More than me, but I'll take it.
Yeah. So but I've been lucky to have a guy like him around as a mentor. So you want to have a mentor
Okay.
on your team. And then, him, Robert Martinez has been a great mentor and motivator. You got to have, you want to talk to the horse and you want to talk to the jockey. You want to have people like that also. They may not be on your direct team, but they're at least a part of the team of information that you can go to, I guess. And you go to these events, and Steve, you'll see these people. You can go up and approach them, and you can ask them questions. They want you to ask them questions, and they'll tell you straight up. Sometimes, and Steve, I mean, I've called up Steve, and he'll tell you something you want to hear, and then sometimes he'll tell you things you don't want to hear, and he'll let you know where you messed up at or whatever. So you want to have that raw and honest mentor, that mentor also that's constantly helping you move your goals forward and kind of showing you, the direction of where and how to do things. You wouldn't go jump in an airplane on your own without having, an instructor or a mentor along the way. So why get into the real estate and, you don't want to do it blindly either.
Gotcha. Ryan, we are a property management company. I'm always curious to see how investors think about that. And there's a school of thought where, my time is valuable. Like 12 hours a week is average what you're putting into it. I know you said you love it and all that, but like Steve always goes through this, like, hey, what is your time worth? Right. You only have so many Wednesdays left. Like he loves the Wednesday for some reason. And it sounds like a good part of your team can be replaced by a professional property manager, and a lot of your time can be saved. I'm sure you thought about it. Have you thought about it? And how do you think about it?
Having a property management company?
Yeah, just having a professional property manager take care of the properties end to end.
Yeah, I mean, maybe at one time and point, maybe do something like that. There was one time when I first transitioned to when I was transitioning to Guam, and that was also after my mom had passed away. Steve had helped me manage some of the properties and stuff, him and Pete. So I did use it. And use it as a tool, so it can be very beneficial. So my thought on it is, if you're going to stay somewhat small with it, you could maybe do it yourself, depending on what you're doing or what your career is. But if I was to get maybe a lot bigger with the single family, then I would probably definitely encourage it as well, because I love my time and value my time more than I value the real estate per se. I mean, I enjoy the real estate. I don't love it per se, but I love the time and I love the freedom.
Ryan, let me ask you this. I know that you just going on these things, what advice would you give for people? Because everybody has a different way of looking at things. And you and I both know as airline pilots, we don't have the regular 9 to 5. It's very, very fluid. We can change. We can have a lot of time off and that kind of stuff. And we can travel and that stuff. And it gives us the ability to have the freedom to think of that stuff. But if you were somebody that had a regular career, 9 to 5 type job, how would you recommend that they do the balance between home life, work life, and now the investing cycle that they're trying to get in? Because that's a different, I think if you had a 9 to 5, I think it would all of a sudden add a much larger dynamic wedge in there that maybe the average person doesn't deal with. And Alex, I think that's something that you may be missing out of the equation, is that Ryan doesn't have a 9 to 5 every day where he gets up, type thing, which gives him the ability to have the freedom. So
right.
What would you say?
So in that case, yeah, then I definitely would look at it a lot differently, and I would probably, especially if you want to expand quickly, because that's the other thing. You're not going to get rich and successful at this stuff doing it slowly. You need to try to move as quickly as you can, and start branching out that way also. So that's kind of the key of it, in my opinion. So yeah, if you can use and have a management company as part of your team when you're initially starting out, especially if you do have that 9 to 5 job and you have, the family that you have to answer to, for sure, involve the management company on that, because then it's going to increase your ability to capture, more streams of income, because you're going to have more time again to focus on the other aspects of your life. And then eventually you can maybe, take some of those houses out of that portfolio and you manage them yourself. And then you include your family. Like Steve, I saw you had your son involved, and he started asking questions and stuff like that. Well, I used to always bring my nephew around to the house. I give him a drill and let him run around in the garage of a rental property and go drill stuff, where I would have him, you give a little kid a flashlight in a rental house that you're looking at purchasing, and they will find stuff with that flashlight that you overlook. And so, but you get them involved, you get that mindset. But you could do that is have the management team help you expand your portfolio as fast as you can, and maybe in different areas. And then some of the houses that are maybe close to your residential house, let's say, so you're not spending too much time driving, then, maybe manage a handful of those yourself if you want to have your family a part of it also. So I would, there's definitely lots of ways to use it as a tool and ways to consider and look at it.
So you agree that it shouldn't be a line, a delineated line of this is rental, this is family. That's how I believe. I believe it should be mixed. I think the biggest challenge we all have as entrepreneurs is we're so busy trying to be quote unquote successful investors, we forget to bring the rest of the family along for the ride. And, for me and my son, giving him a rental property doesn't do it. I can give him my whole portfolio of rentals. He could run it into the ground, teach him to want to own the rentals. And he comes to me and says, Dad, I want to buy a rental. That's a different story. Now he's understanding why I'm doing it. And again, we know this, right? You spend a lot of time educating yourself, as I do, as Alex does. How do we pass that on to our children so that we create that legacy, or to loved ones or whomever? And I think that's where a lot of people, they think that they should be sitting in this room on their own, running numbers, instead of having the whole family or whoever it is involved in that. And I think what you said is so right. I mean, however you can bring them into it, I think it's valuable more than we realize.
Well, yeah, exactly. And I try to bring them in. As a matter of fact, you made me feel better about myself. I was like, man, am I making them listen to too much of this? Because I'll have them listen to the podcast in the car or whatever. Or I bought the Rich Dad, Poor Dad board game, the adult version, and there's a kid version. And then also, it just helps them understand. And again, it doesn't come down to wanting to have all the money in the world or anything like that, but it's about understanding the rules of the game, and then they can pick and choose what they want to do with their lives as far as that. But at least if they understand the rules of engagement, then they can take it wherever. And most people, they do want to help out and give back. Well, make your money doing something, and then you can do that, so everybody can pick and choose what they want to do. And that's kind of the nice thing with the real estate. But yeah, definitely, if you have a management company, it can only help enhance your ability to with that growth. You make sure it's like anything, you do your due diligence on a property, do your due diligence on a management company, on an accountant, lawyer, whatever. You still got to check all that stuff out. And then that also becomes part of the whole educational process. And then initially too, you're going to have a person may have all this dust and all this, like, okay, what am I going to do? But eventually all that dust settles, and then it's just like this calm stream, and then you're able to see and focus and make all these decisions. And then again, you get all these different team members in place, and it just becomes easier to make, other decisions. And, or just, like I said, just enjoy your time, go travel, enjoy the family, whatever you need to do.
Yeah.
It's the option.
Yeah.
Really cool. Well, Ryan, we really do appreciate your time. There's a number of takeaways here that I'm taking home. One is, look, build a team, and maybe do some management yourself to at least understand the game, learn a lot, constant learning, give back, because that will come back to you. It's karma. It is, I believe in karma. It's out there. folks. And
I try to always take care of my professional karma and my personal karma,
and value your time, but also understand your goals. And this was really good, kind of walk through this, how a professional, on top of their, on top of the, I guess, earning echelon, right? Because pilots make decent money. You take a lot of schooling, but you make decent money, and then you have to turn that money into wealth for your family and for your loved ones. But there's also tax implications. So there's a lot here in this episode that you helped us unpack, Ryan. I really appreciate it. Steve, any parting wisdom you want to share with our audience?
No, I think you said it right. And I think, Ryan knows as well as I do, the challenge once you start earning a good salary is how do you keep it? And you start looking at other ways to keep it. Real estate is obviously one of them. The challenge is if you go into real estate uneducated and you don't take the time to educate yourself, the sandbox, we'll call it, of owning real estate, there's a lot of glass in there that'll cut you. And you got to make sure you know what you're doing. Don't just buy a rental property because you have a good paying job and you think you know what you're doing and this is a write-off and this and that. Because again, I think the biggest challenge, and I personally experienced this, when I owned a bunch, is not only do you financially lose money, but you will mentally be stressed. And the sleepless nights of owning a lot of rental properties and not knowing how to fix a situation that you put yourself in, because all I was trying to do is provide a better life for my family. And now I've got myself into this bigger bundle of mess. That's not a good place to be. And I think Ryan, can appreciate that, just because you make a lot of money and you have a career, you don't just go, haphazardly into doing something. You got to educate yourself. And, Ryan takes the time, he educates himself. He's a smart guy. He knows what he's doing. He doesn't just jump into it. And I think that, to me, that's the biggest takeaway of always keep educating yourself. And more importantly, I like you said, giving back, I think is huge. I know Ryan's a big part of that. We do a lot of giving back. And I think that's something to be said. I was listening to a podcast once, I think it was Tony Robbins, and he said, if you don't give back when you have $1, you'll definitely not give back when you have $1 million. And I thought that was an interesting thing to say. Basically saying there's no time that all of a sudden you start giving back. You start giving back now. And that becomes part of like your DNA of who you are. You don't just flip a switch and say, now I'm going to give back, because you'll always have a reason not to. That's why they say tithing, you take the first 10% when you want to donate, because the last 10% never exists because it always gets eaten up by something else. So that's kind of my takeaway from it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you for listening to the show. And if you like what you hear, please do subscribe. And maybe if you find it in your heart to give us a rating, maybe a 5-star,
Giving
I
back.
don't know,
That's giving back.
a 4-star for Steve.
Yeah. Oh, but I'm
that would
shiny.
be highly appreciated. We're just starting this show. We want to bring more guests like Ryan and try to just help each other out here. That's the thing. We're all learning together. And, Ryan was lucky enough to find a group of people. If you want to join our group, Mastermind Real Estate Investment Club on Facebook, join us. Steve is approachable. Talk to him. And thank you very much for listening. This was a great episode. Ryan, thank you very much for your time and waking up at 3 a.m. And until next time, be well.
Right,
and
Thanks, Ryan. Thanks, guys. We'll see you.
Thank you.